Today, we are diving deep into the heart of a cosmic mystery. It's a drama of light and shadow, and it's hidden inside a single, seemingly flawed word in the book of Genesis. We're going to deconstruct a secret whispered in the Zohar, a story about why the moon, our constant companion in the night sky, shines with a borrowed, diminished light. It all kicks off with this perfect, harmonious glow of two great lights, but as you'll see, something shifts, a shadow gets introduced, and the very fabric of creation is changed forever. So I want you to picture this. Imagine the void before creation, just a silent, inky black canvas of pure potential. Then, suddenly, a violent, soundless ignition. A unified, indivisible light explodes outward, just bathing the brand new cosmos in its pure glow. And from this single source, two great luminaries take shape, blazing with the exact same intensity, like twin sovereigns in a sky of perfect harmony. But then, you see a subtle wavering. One of the great lights starts to flicker. Its radiant power contracts, it pulls inward, and its golden blaze cools down to a silver disk. Now it's still beautiful, of course, but it's different. It's now a reflection, a subordinate, shining only with the glory of the other. And deep within its now diminished glow, a subtle shadow resides, like a permanent memory of the fullness it once had.
You know, this whole story starts with a verse we all think we know, right? From Genesis chapter 1. It says God made the two great lights. But then, in the very same sentence, it calls them the great light and the small light. Wait, what? It's a contradiction that has puzzled sages for thousands of years. How can they both be great if one is immediately called small? This isn't just a fancy turn of phrase, you see. It's the very first clue in a cosmic detective story.
And the mystery gets so much deeper when you look at the original Hebrew text. The word for lights is merod, but in the Torah scroll itself, it's actually written defectively. It's missing a letter. Now, this isn't a typo. In the mystical tradition, there are no accidents in the Torah. This missing letter is a deliberate breadcrumb pointing to a huge event, a rupture in the fabric of creation itself. So, let's follow this clue and see where it takes us. Our journey today is going to unfold this cosmic drama in 6 parts. We'll start with that flaw in the fabric of the text itself. Then, we'll explore the original state of the two great lights, what they were like before things went wrong. We'll witness the exact moment of diminishment and the entry of a curse into the system. After that, we'll understand how our world now operates as a system of reflection. Then, and this is the best part, we'll discover our own crucial role in healing this ancient wound. And finally, we'll look towards the prophesied future when this broken harmony will finally be restored.
So let's kick things off with that cosmic typo. I'm telling you, this isn't just a grammar lesson. It's a clue left for us by the cosmos itself, and it encodes the entire story of our reality inside just one word.
Okay, look here. On the left, you see the word lights spelled out completely. It represents wholeness, fullness, connection. That little letter in the middle, the vav, it's like a channel, a conduit for divine energy. But on the right, that's what we actually have in the text. The vav is missing. It's not just a missing letter. It means the channel is broken. A void has been introduced right at the source, creating a fundamental lack, a state of separation that is now literally written into the code of creation.
And here's the linguistic bombshell the Zohar just drops on us. It points out that the defective spelling of lights, me'oroth, shares the exact same root letters as the Hebrew word mi'era, which means a curse. The text itself is telling us that within the very concept of these lights, a curse is embedded. The flaw in the word is the flaw in the cosmos. So, if a curse is embedded in the word, that implies there was a moment when everything broke. And to really understand that rupture, we have to appreciate the perfection that came before it. We need to rewind to that moment of creation, before the flaw was introduced, back when the whole system was just a symphony of perfect unity.
Now, to talk about this, we have to bring in a core concept of Kabbalah, the Sephirot. Don't let the word intimidate you. Just think of them as 10 fundamental attributes or channels through which the infinite, unknowable divine essence flows and then manifests into the reality we actually know. They're kind of like the spiritual physics of our universe.
So in our drama, the two main players correspond to two of these Sephirot. The sun, that represents Tiferet, which means beauty or harmony. It's the masculine principle. The groom, the heart of it all, channeling divine light directly. The moon represents Malkut, which means kingdom or sovereignty. It's the feminine principle, the bride, the final Sephirah that takes all that light from above and gives it actual form in our physical world. And here's the crucial part. In the beginning, they were created as perfect, equal partners. Two kings, as the mystics say, ruling with a single crown. A perfect system. And right here, this is where that beautiful symphony hits a really dissonant chord. We've now arrived at the pivotal moment of conflict, the instant that perfect, balanced, harmonious system is broken.
The story goes that the moon, Malchut, went before the Creator with a complaint. It said, "It's not right for two kings to use the same crown." Now, this wasn't just arrogance. It was a statement about cosmic architecture. Think about it. In a world that would eventually need hierarchy and distinct roles, having two equal sources of command, it creates a paradox. So Malchut's statement was really just articulating the need for differentiation. And that's what set the whole diminishment in motion.
And the response to this cosmic dilemma wasn't to eliminate one of them, it was to re-architect the entire system. The divine decree came down: go and diminish yourself. The moon, Malchut, was commanded to contract its own light, to reduce its stature, and to shift from being a primary source of light to being a receiver and a reflector. This was the moment of separation.
And this one decree had a massive cascade of effects. First, the potential for a curse that was hinted at in the defective spelling of Mishirat, well, it becomes real. A state of lack officially enters the system. Second, this new vulnerability, this crack in creation's foundation, creates an opening for what the mystics called the serpent, a force of negativity and separation to inject its spiritual pollution, or zahama, into the world. And third, the perfect unity of giver and receiver is broken. They are now fundamentally separate entities.
You can actually visualize the energetic shift that happened. In its original state, the moon was just filled with pure white light, the light of chesed, which is boundless loving kindness and mercy. But after the diminishment, this light was drastically reduced. The moon's inherent nature, now operating from a place of lack, became dominated by red light, the color of din, which is strict judgment, limitation, and setting boundaries. And with that came the black, the shadow of absence, the void left by the light that departed, which, by the way, also contains the potential for evil to take root.
So the original unified operating system crashed. Hard. And now, the cosmos has to reboot under a whole new set of rules. We now live in a world that's defined by reflection, by cycles, and by what you could call a degraded signal.
To really get this new system, we need another key Kabbalistic idea, or choser, or returning light. The sun, Tiferet, now beams out Or Yashar, which is direct light. The moon, Malchut, receives this light. But, and this is key, in order to have its own identity and not just be completely wiped out by the sun's brilliance, it has to push back or reflect that light. It's this act of reflecting the light back up that builds the moon's structure, its reality, and gives it its power. So even though it's diminished, the moon gets a new and absolutely crucial role in this new system. By reflecting light in these predictable cycles of waxing and waning, it becomes the governor of our earthly reality. It sets the clock, it governs time itself, it establishes the calendar for the holy festivals, and it embodies the rhythm of monthly renewal. Our entire experience of linear, cyclical time, it's all a product of the moon's diminishment. Okay, let's make this a bit more concrete with a modern analogy. Think of the infinite, unknowable Godhead as the offline source code. The sun, Tiferet, that's the primary cloud server. It's always on, 100% uptime, full bandwidth, pulling directly from the source. The moon, Malchut, well, that's our user interface. It doesn't generate its own data anymore, it can only reflect and display what it gets from the server. But here's the kicker. The curse, the serpent, it has installed a corruption layer, like a malicious firewall, right between the server and the UI, and this layer introduces latency, signal degradation, and distortion. Our entire physical reality is the output we see on the screen, filtered through this diminished, reflecting, and slightly corrupted interface.
And for all you engineers listening, we can frame it this way. Step 1, a unified power source was split into a primary emitter and a secondary reflector. This immediately triggers Step 2, signal degradation. The output from the reflector, the moon's light, is by its very nature a lower fidelity reflected version of the original signal. In Step 3, this reflector is then given a new critical job, cyclical synchronization. It governs all time-based protocols, the system clocks, and the scheduled events, or festivals, that define the rhythm of the entire material world.
Or hey, let's break it down into a video game. In the beginning, you had two player characters, Sun and Moon, and they both had equal maxed-out power levels. But the Moon character complained to the game developer that it was confusing to have two main heroes. So the developer nerfed the Moon, and it lost its main power-up, its own light source. Now, the Moon character can only reflect the Sun's light. But In the new patch, it got an amazing new job. It now controls the game clock, so all the special holiday events, all the seasons, all the daily quests are now timed perfectly to the moon's cycles.
So we have a broken system, a diminished light, and a world governed by reflection and separation. This isn't just a sad story about the cosmos. It's a story about us. Because this cosmic problem has a human solution. We're now shifting to our role in what Kabbalah calls tikkun, the sacred, ongoing project of cosmic repair.
This right here is one of the most staggering statements in all of Jewish literature. In the Talmud, the sages teach that God itself says, "Bring an atonement for me, for I diminished the moon." The creator of the universe is asking us for an atonement. I mean, that just highlights the sheer gravity of this cosmic wound. It's not just a flaw, it's a source of divine sorrow, a breakage that God, so to speak, is asking us to help repair.
This brings us to a really critical understanding. Our spiritual actions are not just symbolic gestures. They are seen as having real, mechanical effects on the cosmic system. When we do rituals for the new moon, we are directly participating in the atonement God asked for, helping the moon to renew itself each month. When we observe the festivals at the proper times, we are literally aligning our consciousness with the cosmic clock, strengthening Malchut's new role. When we perform acts of kindness, we are actively pumping that white light of Chesed back into a system that's dominated by the red light of Din. And when we achieve sacred union between masculine and feminine energies in our own lives, we are mirroring and helping to restore the ultimate unification of Tiferet and Malchut up above.
And here is the ultimate alchemy, the secret of redemption hidden right inside the wound itself. Through our work of tikkun, of refinement, the very letters that spell out the curse, Mem Aleph Resh Tav, can be rearranged. They become Aleph Mem Resh Tav, which spells Imrat, meaning word or saying. And this new word appears in a phrase from Psalms, Imrat Hashem Terufa, which means a refined word of God. The flaw itself contains the seed of its own perfection. The curse contains the letters of the ultimate blessing. It's beautiful.
This path of tikkun, this repair work, it leads us to the final act of our drama. We're going to conclude by looking forward to the ultimate resolution, the prophesied time of complete and total restoration when the symphony will finally be reborn.
The prophet Isaiah gives us a vision of this future state of cosmic perfection. He says that, in the Messianic era, the light of the moon shall be as the light of the sun. The diminishment will be healed, the separation will be overcome. Malchut, the moon, will be restored to her original stature, and the two great lights will once again shine with an equal, unified brilliance, but this time in a perfected, redeemed reality.
And so we end by turning this grand cosmic narrative inward. Because if the universe above is a mirror of the universe within us, if the Sephirot are not only cosmic forces, but also the very structure of our own souls, then this story is our story. It asks us to look inside and identify the parts of ourselves that feel diminished, that shine with a borrowed light, that have been separated from their source. So the question is, what diminished light are you meant to restore within yourself? Thank you for joining us for this complete journey through the Pardes. We hope these ancient truths help you and your family improve your own dimensions this week. If you enjoyed this full chapter deep dive, please like, subscribe, and share which part of the journey touched your soul in the comments. We'll see you in the next chapter.